And then we'll go back to the screen share. Okay, ta-da. Okay, so view the present. There's no time like the present. Love the English language. So this is called Go Team. I used to be a sports guy. Guide to Successful Grasstops Outreach. And I dedicated this. We did a presentation on this 2 weeks ago. I became a granddad almost a month ago, actually, to the day. There's my little granddaughter. She's a lot bigger and fatter now. But like everybody else, extra motivation for doing what we're doing. Here's the long list of contents. And this is going to be useful, hopefully, later as a reference, as well as, this live presentation. So I won't go through all this right now, but the numbers there are slide numbers. So Business Climate Leaders is an action team of Citizens Climate Lobby. We're 100% Citizens Climate Lobby, and we've decided to focus on businesses at the national and the local level, but we've also decided that there's not a lot of difference between businesses and the president of the university or the local Audubon chapter, anything else, community leaders. So this Grasstops Outreach, as you've probably heard in CCL, the 5 levers of political will, Grasstops Outreach is a big deal. So we're focusing on that, not just businesses. We have an actual mission, and there it is. And there's something I'll show you a little bit later. We have chapter teams. You're a part of one of our chapter teams now, hooray. And we also have sector teams, and these are people who may be more experienced in a particular industry sector, like I come from clean energy and telecom, perhaps, where we're concentrating on those big national companies that have brand names and perhaps have a lot of local facilities. So we can provide you introductions to perhaps, say, the local Cliff Bar Bakery in Boise, which we actually did. Okay. Let's see. And we're going to keep your face out of the way there. Okay. Let's see. So Grasstops Outreach. This is actually a tool for I don't know what it's a tool for, but the idea is that we have a certain amount of power and we can push. And we're finding that with a lot of members of Congress, that doesn't necessarily get us very far. What we really need is to compound that leverage. We can push a little bit or pull a little harder on our local community leaders, and then they in turn can go talk to, meet with, send letters to their members of Congress, so we get support for our legislation and our success. And there's our little walnut there. Are you all seeing this little menu here down at the bottom?
I don't see a menu.
No.
Good.
Oh,
okay.
It just popped up now. The slide 6.
There we go. Oh, I see what it is. I'm just learning this tool. So this Go Team, Grasstops Outreach Team, there's a bit of a method, no rights reserved. Right now we have chapters, and for years we've had chapters working on Grasstops Outreach, and I am a part of the Santa Rosa chapter. I co-founded that, and until recently was a group co-lead. So I've got experience with that, but the Grasstops Outreach efforts, as supported as they were by a whole variety of things, the endorser program, the group leaders, CCU, Citizens Climate University, the online training stuff, we felt they could do with more. So basically, here are the 4 elements of it. We help organize and train the team. We provide a proven set of simple, effective tools and templates. We have ongoing mentoring and support for team meetings, or even in between for the team leaders. And we provide introductions to local companies from our sector teams. That networking component is really important. If we find somebody somewhere that can help us somewhere, we try to share the love. So that's a very high level view of why we're doing this. And there's the so we tried it out in Idaho. There's actually a CCL blog post on this. It's a fairly short read. The link will be in the slideshow, which I can send you, and I'll post a link to after this. But we basically did this approach in Idaho. We ended up getting 12 local businesses to sign a letter to Mike Simpson, their local member of Congress, asking him to join the Solutions Caucus and support carbon pricing and meet with the community leaders. So this is the Idaho crew there back in Washington, D.C. Whoops, clicked on the wrong thing. Okay. So there we go. So the important thing to remember about this whole slide presentation is that if at the end of it you're kind of bewildered, looks like a lot of stuff, I can't possibly do this, just remember that when you take the next step, we'll be able to help you with that. And that's typically, you'll have a kickoff meeting, you'll have a bunch of people, and we'll help train them and orient them to the tools and help you get started with some low-hanging fruit. So keep that in mind. So the project management approach, I'm a program manager. I've got my certification, or used to have it at least. And it's just an efficient way to get the right things done. You have a team, in this case, chapter volunteers. You have certain tasks that you've identified you're going to do. You have timing to those tasks. Ultimately, we want to put a price on carbon. And the ta-da, I was trying to think of something else that started with T, the deliverables. Sorry, obsessed. The endorsements, but it's not just endorsements. There's been a big focus on that, and that's really important. But we want to establish relationships and partnerships that can go beyond an endorsement. So when a bill is introduced, we can get back to these people who maybe signed our letter or met with your members of Congress, and they can contact the members of Congress and say, boy, we really love it if you would co-sponsor. So that's sort of the end game for this. Anyway, the method, there's like 5 phases to the project. The team starts up, and I'll cover these in more detail, so I'm just going to touch this briefly. You start the team up, you identify your prospects, you contact them, you engage them towards action, and then you deliver the results. So, and they have a little sequential arrangement there. So the team leadership, start with a leader who will get people organized and coordinated, keep things moving, and join a monthly call. So that's you folks. And that's a really critical role. You don't have to be a business expert. You don't have to be a great schmoozer or a meeting closer. But the leadership skills that you've brought to Citizens Climate Lobby and that are being developed in CCL are just so key to this. And strong collaborative team that shares responsibility for success. Okay, so you have kind of core team members here. These are people in the community that are part of your chapters. Represent CCL in one-on-one conversation, if it's a phone call, if it's a face meeting, or a meeting over the phone. Community connections are helpful, the more the better. Research skills, you can have somebody that doesn't want to do anything in public, but they can dig into LinkedIn or the 10K reports from the corporations and come up with all this great stuff that will help us identify, prioritize, contact, engage, and ultimately convince these community leaders to support us. Having project management and data skills, especially in Google Apps, it's good to have one person on the team that's very comfortable with this. It's fairly easy to learn, but that's a significant thing. And then the willing to make time and take time. And I've been a volunteer. I got laid off from my job a year and a half ago, decided I was just going to do this until our bill got passed. It hasn't been passed yet, so I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to make ends meet. But nevertheless, we all have to respect the limitations that people have on their time and, you know, set expectations that are reasonable. So that's a big part of being the leader too. You don't want people to feel really bad and guilty, so they hide and go away. On the other hand, you want to give them a challenging goal. So when they hit it, which we think they will, they'll be all excited and want to take on the next one. So your support team, this is what's different. You're not on your own. The chapter leader or your member of Congress liaison, I know that's some of you in this case, comes in at least at the beginning and from time to time and provides advice about strategy, contacts in the community, how do we evaluate this particular prospect, this business, this organization, how we might get to them. That's an important role. And then the BCL partner, myself, a fellow named Harold Hedelman, who you've probably met online and will probably run into sooner or later. Incredible guy, helped start this whole thing. So that's the team. I'm going to take a brief pause here if you have any questions.
I do have a quick question about the, it seemed like the endorsement letters that they're asking for before. Is it that you guys would like us not to pursue that, like on the list of different asks that you can ask a company to do that Randy sent me? I didn't see that listed as one of them. Is that, so are you guys in parallel with that same program, or are you really trying to combine it so we're going and asking the company to do as much as they can? Some of it could be an endorsement letter. It could be that we bring a member of Congress to their factory. It could be anything in that range. Is that okay?
That's the latter answer is the correct one. Endorsements are valuable, and being able to just wave a list or put a stack on the desk of companies that have signed on to something specific, ideally CF&D or just something on climate, is good. But we feel like it can't end there. And a great example is the whole, what do we do when a bill is introduced? We want to go back to those people, have them remember us, and have them remember us talking to them about the day the bill is introduced and how important their ongoing support will be. So yeah, so working very closely with Todd Elvins, who's been managing the endorser program and supports what we're doing here. But it's one of many things. And what you'll find, this is one of the critical learnings we've had over the last 3 years that we've been doing this, is you don't go into a company like I did to my employer, Enphase Energy of Petaluma, and say, you've got to support carbon fee and dividend. It's the best thing around, believe me. And they were like, whoa, wait a minute. So building the relationship, getting them to sign on to something simple. And I've got a proposal pending where the ask could be as simple as encouraging Rand Paul. Well, let's put it this way. I don't think any of your members are on the Solutions Caucus yet. So that's always been an ask. But we're trying to get an event going in June with businesses on the Hill with the Solutions Caucus, and asking one of your community leaders to encourage your member of Congress to attend that meeting. And we hope to have Apple and Exxon and a whole bunch of big name companies there. Just asking them to attend a meeting is a fairly simple thing, very low commitment level, but it starts the relationship. So you can be creative in those, but they are all kind of building up to the point where they become ultimately, we hope, champions for carbon fee and dividend. Okay? Yeah, very good question. Okay, so we actually have some exercises here that we did at a workshop at our conference, and I've left these in, but I'm not going to go through them now. So you have a kickoff meeting. This is where the brain trust from the chapter and the state and the region figures out what you want to do and when you want to do it. If you want to do a community leader letter and you'd like to deliver it to your members of Congress before the June lobby day, for instance, that's all very clear. And everybody here, can you see my pointer? Yeah, that's us. We're school kids here. We're trying to get on the same page. And one of those is probably yours, Ren, huh? About that age?
Yeah, right, yeah.
So the what is all clear. Everybody's working toward the same goal, and you bring it up at every meeting. How are we doing? And then, when is achievable milestone? So like maybe we're going to shoot to get 6 endorsements by the end of April. Let's give it a try. So that's part of it, covered at the kickoff meeting, which I or Harold or maybe somebody else from the BCL leadership would attend. And then schedule regular check-ins. Some people have been doing weekly. Some people are doing what we call fortnightly, which is every 14 days, I learned. 2 weeks. Assign tasks for research, writing the letters, outreach messages, and start working on the prospect list. So all these things are done in this kickoff meeting. Try to get a time where everybody can attend. I'm going to go through this quickly. We've got tools, templates, and training. here's some of the stuff. You can refer to it later. I'll cover some of these important ones in more detail. And we have a little workbook that a lot of people are using just for their chapter activities. It has a meeting agenda and minutes, a place for action items, and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's a Google Sheet. And there's the action item, the professional superhero. That's me. Okay, so another part of the startup is just writing the letters. If you're going to do a leader letter and you're going to do outreach letters to the people that you want to sign that letter, it's just getting these things written so that when you start shopping them around, you can say, here is the draft of the letter we'd like to send to Rand Paul. You know, dear Representative Paul, blah, 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 or Senator, he's a representative, right?
Rand Paul's a senator, and then Massey's a representative,
Massey,
and then we have,
okay.
Is it Shabbat? Ren, who do you guys think you're trying to target? Weinstrup and
they're both representatives.
Yeah, that's
So you've got a combination here, and that's new, interesting, and good. So, dear Senator Paul, here are the things that we want to ask, and there's no doubt by anybody who's on the team about what that is. Try to get that out of the way first. You're also going to be doing some cold call emails, and having those letters written. We've got templates, we've got examples that you can just use and adapt for your own purpose. So that's kind of the startup phase here. Now this next thing is ICE, and I don't know what to call this, chasing ICE or what, but it's a clever little acronym that identify, contact, and engage your prospects. And this is really the heart of what you're up to. So we'll go into that in some detail, but here's just a little schematic. So these are grass tops. You can see they're all grasses, and we're going to give you a list of these. I don't have it quite ready yet, but it's on its way. You'll want to prioritize based on a number of factors, and then kind of sort that list and make sure the ones that are the high priority are at the top of the list, and then you assign people to those. So if one of them or two of them are telecom companies, and Teresa, you can talk that language. You could be the one to write an outreach letter or make a phone call or certainly attend the meeting and say, in my experience, blah, 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 and help put it in terms that they understand, that they think, one, you get it as much as possible, what our business is about, what our concerns are about, and two, I can trust you to give me reliable information. And that's part of what CCL does with members of Congress. So not different in that respect. And then once you've contacted those people and you've got the first meeting, then you build the love, you build the relationship, and ultimately ask them to do something with us. So those are the 3 stages, and we'll cover those in more detail. Does anybody recognize the grass tops here? Any botanists?
You mean like corn and wheat?
Yeah, and that one is
barley.
It's rice. At least that's what the clip art thing said. Okay, I love clip art. So identify, create a prospect list. This is really super important, this prospect list. I've worked with, even in my chapter where there's like 4 different versions of the list, and the first half of your 30-minute meeting is figuring out what's the most current one. Can't do that. Waste of time, burns people out. We have one list. We give you a list that has all of the prospects, most all of the prospects you might want to contact. So we pull this out of this Reference USA database. I'll show you an example here. Okay. Where's that example? I'm gonna have to go back here. Yeah, and we'll look at this a little bit more, but this is what it starts off looking like. So as we identify these companies, this is from New York, and it happens to be, we've got a number of districts. You'll get a workbook, a Google Sheet workbook like this, that'll have, I guess it'll have all of, if Rand Paul's in there, it'll have to have all of the Ohio, I'm sorry, is Rand Paul Kentucky or Ohio?
He's Kentucky.
Kentucky, shame on me.
That's okay.
Yeah, it'll have all the Kentucky districts, and then it'll have the 2 Cincinnati districts that you're working with, separate tabs. But basically, this is like, oh, I recognize them, Amphenol connector. Well, Teresa, Amphenol connector, you must know about them, right?
Yes, I know who they are, yeah.
They make those little connectors that go on the back of the circuit boards.
Right.
Anyway, I think they're telecom. But the point is, you'll go through this list and you go, yeah, okay, that's a possibility. So you can give them maybe a priority 1 for now, and you go down this list and you see, and there's ways to organize this as well. So if you want to just filter for all of the ones that look like they're involved with food, for instance, you can clear everything, and then you click on dairy products, and you click on donut manufacturers, all important. Anyway, let's just do those and see how many donut manufacturers there. Granny Kitchen, got them. And they have 250 employees there in Frankfurt. This is New York, of course. So you're going to do the same thing in your districts. But that's the importance of this tool. And when you're in this stage, you're trying to take 250 and whittle it down to maybe 25. So you look at things like how many employees, what do you know about these places? You might go into, and I'm getting off a little bit off of a tangent here, so I'm going to come back to the slides and see where that takes us. Okay, view the present.
Could I ask a quick question?
Please.
So it looks to me like the spreadsheet we were just looking at is a way to source prospects.
Correct.
Would the suggestion be that any kind of documentation as far as like, who's working on what and everything stays on that spreadsheet? Or is it like, okay, we're going to focus on this person, we're going to now carry it over to the endorser database that's on, like, do you want them to be communicating, like, kind of prospect versus one we're actively working on? Or is it more, okay, this is a group that is more organized, so we're going to stay on this new spreadsheet that you just showed?
Okay, that's a real good question, and I'm almost there with that, so I'll answer that in a moment. So anyway, we use this same sheet to track through the identification and research and prioritization, the contact efforts, and the engagement, follow-up meetings, etc. And the reason we're not using the endorser database right now, and we intend to, is that it doesn't have the capability to present the data in a way that is as friendly to that process as we think it needs to be. And they are aware of this, and I think with the next version of software, we're trying to have something that basically gives that a view of, it's kind of a table view that you all can edit and review at your meetings. And you can click on a little shortcut in your browser, and it'll take you right to that sheet. So it's kind of like ease of access and ease of use. We do want to make sure that any company that you're actually in touch with, or like if they're major companies, that you're listed in the endorser database as a delegate, just so nobody else starts trying to contact them. Because the rule for anybody is, if you're going after a company, particularly one that looks like it's not just one particular location, but like in Arkansas, Walmart. If somebody in Arkansas gets the idea they want to work on Walmart, they'd go into the endorser database, they'd look it up, and they would see Chris McNamara is the delegate for Walmart, and they'd get in touch with Chris. So we're trying to keep that going, but for the time being, we're working off of this one Google sheet, and you'll see how we use it through the entire process.
And one other quick question on your prospect sheet, do you flag if they've already signed an endorser letter, or should we just always be checking both?
Kind of.
Oh, okay.
So I'll show you that in just a second.
Okay.
So anyway, that sheet you just saw, this is like an iChart version of it, and basically what we're trying to do is, so you have one single row. Whoops. You have one single row for each organization, whether it's a company or a nonprofit or academic or faith or whatever. And on that, you have information that helps you identify, select, and prioritize them. We'll go into how that's done in just a moment. This is really the weeds, by the way. This is as far down into the grass as we get with this process. And it'll become more familiar once you actually put your hands on your actual prospect list and start doing some of this stuff. So just a bit of a warning there. But once you've identified them and prioritized them, then you got to find their contact information, and that's all in the same place there. And then it's time to make the phone call, send the email, stalk them at community events, whatever it might be. Once you've got that first meeting scheduled, then it gets recorded in the engage section, and we'll cover that. So you're not looking in multiple places. You don't have to look at different screens. It's all on one screen. So that's the prospect list that we're going to provide. So, and again, here's just some general things that you would do. We're going to give you around 200, 250 names from each district. And you may recognize a lot of those as you go through. But then you're just going to think, wow, well, I know that Representative Massey, from looking at his website, he's really big on, I don't know, nuclear power or rice farms, or I guess it would be corn back there or something. Knowing what you know about them, you go, well, that, or you can look up, there's a thing called Open Secrets. Maybe you've seen that. It's a list of campaign donors. Or maybe when you were last talking to their staffer or the member themselves, somebody said, well, whose voices would you like to hear? Because we'd like to talk to those people as well and understand what their concerns are and help them, help us shape the best possible climate action. And they could say, oh yeah, well, we work a lot with the Sonoma County Alliance, and we work with Sonoma Clean Power in my particular territory. So we go out and we pursue them. They become a higher priority because the Congress member or their staff has told us so. The campaign donors is a very cool list of who's giving them money, and you can look at that. You can network, and this is highly recommended, going to organizations that you might have presented to or plan to, join them even, but talk to the people there. Excuse me. Get referrals from us. So good example is there was a Hewlett-Packard office in Idaho Falls that we had a connection with the corporate office in Silicon Valley, and we got the corporate office to contact the Idaho Falls office and get them on board with the letter they did in Idaho. Of course, friends, family, associates, my wife's brother-in-law is the CFO of Williams-Sonoma Food Supplies, that kind of thing. This who do you know is something that we've thought about, we haven't done yet, but if you've got a large roster of people, most of whom are not actively involved in CCL, to have a structured survey where they can easily contact you and say, yeah, I have a good connection with this person, and then they can do an email or a live cup of coffee introduction with them. So these are all the things that you do to take that list, which is just a template format in Google Sheets, and make it meaningful and to make it useful and to pull the important organizations up to the top. Couple of additional things, and we can go back to that sheet if you want to and look at it some more, but that's something that once we actually have your companies, that I can spend time with you at the kickoff meeting and get you started in that process. Just did that with New York, upstate New York, and they're going to take the next couple of weeks to go through and try to prioritize their list, and then we're going to meet with them again, and we'll all come up with a strategy. So school boards are particularly responsive. We've got a guy here in our own county who has just basically kind of made a spark, and now it's running off like a wildfire. These school boards are adopting these pro-climate action, pro-fee and dividend, pro-nonpartisan outreach to members of state houses and congresses. So if you've got any kind of relation with school boards, or even if you don't, if you've got school kids, good place to start. And hospitals have also been a good place to start because the health industry gets this. They seem to get it a lot quicker than others. And then the sector team leaders, we actually have a list of all those people. So you'd be able to actually call up Randy Salem and say, Randy, do you have any connections with Hershey and oh yeah, we're working with Mars and we're working on Hershey. Let me introduce you to, ta-da, you got an email introduction to their sustainability officer. So that's the kind of stuff that will help you build this list into something more than just a hopelessly long task list. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, this is just going to be oh, I didn't mean to put this whole thing in there. And now that I've explained it 3 times already, I think I'll probably leave it out. But this is just a visual. It's going to be part of the slides that shows how we are working both from the top down and the bottom up to lobby in Congress from our sector teams with like the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, which is a big deal. And then individual companies, and then they can contact their facilities around the country. And if you say we need help with a solar energy company, SunPower will introduce us to the local SunPower distributor, and they can get in touch with you and you can work on your member of Congress. This is what we did in Idaho. So if that looks a little like too much, apologies for that. Wait for my animations to finish. There we go. Okay, so let's see. We've been about a little over 35 minutes into this. So the research is, the more you know about your high priority companies, you're not going to research all 250, but the top 10, 15, 20, you want to find out who are the decision makers and who are possible intermediaries. Like, do they have a sustainability manager or a community affairs person or somebody whose job it is to care about the things that we're working on? What's the best way to reach them? How do we, what's in the letter? And then we can research. The more we know about our member of Congress and even their staff members, the better we're going to be able to open up a conversation with them, and ultimately, get some responses that we like. Learning about the company through their website, their values. Do they have corporate social responsibility program of any kind? Look at their Twitter feed, look at their LinkedIn for the individuals. And this is something a research kind of person can do. When you've prioritized, say, your top 10, you say, Sam or Sue, can you get us, what can you find out about these people that will help us get them to answer our emails and our phone calls? And that comes back to you, and now you're better equipped for that task. So again, some more sources. Google Alerts, that's another one, or you Google for news stories. So here's another element that's fairly important, prioritization, and have this thing called ALI, access, likelihood to act, and impact. So when you're going down that list, here's ABC Brewing. We've got access to them because I am softball buddies with their sustainability manager. Are they likely to act? Yes, they've got a full sustainability program. The impact, maybe not so great because they only have 150 employees and they're kind of new in the area. So we'll give them a 2 and not a 3. Coal Council, access, yeah, but likely to act, not very likely. We think these guys are going to be the last ones to support carbon pricing. Great impact because they're a big company. And local employees, maybe that's 1,200 instead of 12. But you use the statistics, the little bit you know here and can find out from other sources, just to just very quickly rule people in or rule them out. You get that idea? So will they talk to us? Will they do something that's significant on climate? And will that actually have an impact on the member of Congress? All important factors. So getting the first meeting is just consider it knocking on the door. Every company gets a delegate, and this is where you would enter that delegate in the outreach database. Again, get their contact information. How do you contact them? Use a proven leader letter template. Info for their specific industry, that sector toolkit. We're going to try to produce those for all of the major sectors, but like right now for schools or hospitals, we've got some good material. Who is going to sign or send? We've got a couple of CEOs that we've been using to send letters to high-profile companies that signed the Low Carbon USA letter. So we're trying to get more of these people, but you're more likely to get a response if it's signed by the former CEO of Bridgestone America than if it's signed by Bruce Hagen. So that's part of the strategy. And then this follow-up, see the patience here, the patience, polite and persistent patience. Sometimes those seeds take a long time to sprout, but it's a pretty exciting day when they do. So, and then the recalibration. Maybe you just need a different approach. And that's part of the conversation that we're going to have with you at your regular meetings. Boy, they don't seem to be responding to this. Well, wait a minute, I just found out about something. Why don't you try this? Or can we get somebody else to try? And then here's some of the exercises that we did at our workshop on that. Oops. The last part is, this looks a lot more like what you're doing with your members of Congress. You plan your meeting. We've got some good resources on how to go through that. It's like a 3-page guide. And then, you know, what are the asks? And we've got a list of asks that'll help you think beyond just endorsements. And endorsements, again, are important, but they may not be ready to put their name in writing. But maybe like Facebook did 2 years ago, or Salesforce, another big high-tech company, they said, well, we're not going to endorse fee and dividend or send our lobbyists to Washington, but we're going to send an email to all of our employees asking them to call their members of Congress on the day before you lobby. And this is a pitch that we do every year to I think it's the day before or the Friday before. We try to have a lot of people call in and say, I can't travel to Washington, but I'd really like you to support Citizens Climate Lobby and fee and dividend. So that was an action that Salesforce took with their X thousand employees, and it was significant. They got to think like that. Okay, here's the final exercise. So I'm going to go very quickly through these last couple here. After we deliver, we get the signatures, you know, we deliver it to our member of Congress, or they attend the meeting, all the standard thank yous, and then leverage whatever connections you made, follow up on any introductions, you know, get back to the people who signed the letter and say, thank you so much, and we delivered it, and here's the photograph of us delivering the letter, and now what? Whatever is appropriate for the chapter or the project at that moment. Lessons learned is a good idea, so if your team wants to say, well, what did we learn from all this, and what can we do better next time? That's the way companies and organizations can grow and get better, so we're trying to just make that a habit. And then this was just the beginning. Here, when a bill is introduced, if all of your communications are up to date on that prospect list or eventually in outreach database, and you know how best to reach each contact, you got good phone numbers. When that bill is introduced, you can pick up the phone and call the cell phone number for Jim Happ of LabCon, the largest manufacturing company in my hometown of Petaluma, and say, hey, Jim, just want to leave a message for you. There's a new bill. It's called HR 2521. It's a really great carbon fee and dividend bill. And if you can call Representative Huffman and tell him to co-sponsor and, you know, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So you've got it all kind of figured out, who you're going to call, what their number is, what you're going to say, and we can have a quick response. And imagine if we've got 60 or 100 of these outreach programs going, when all of those leaders, community leaders, all call within a 1-week period, that could have a tremendous impact. So that, and then beyond that, this is just, you are becoming a community leader. You're making contacts, you're learning skills, and if you want to go somewhere else with this, whether it's in CCL or climate or whatever, this is part of the personal growth aspect of it. So the get started part is there's have to put in the appealing baby picture there. But if since you folks have already decided you want to pursue this, you're past some of this, the next step for you would be, once we get all of your district data into the prospect list, that we can have another meeting with your team, and we can start, you know, do a very brief review of this, or you may have already done it, get right into that identification stage. Who are the people that we want to focus on, and who are we going to assign to each of those? And this is just a long-term vision that we wanted to put in there, that we have 600 of these teams in 3 years, and we've passed carbon fee and dividend, and we're now working on kind of a broad range of climate initiatives, private and public. And you people are respected in the community as leaders of your own right. So, some other resources here. Questions? So we got about 15 minutes left.
I have a list.
I knew you did.
I'll try to start with the ones that I think would be kind of like generally applicable. I guess my first question is, when you've shared a bunch of materials, are there restrictions about who you would want to see them, like either within CCL or even as we're approaching businesses? Like I'm just trying to get a grasp on like what do we hold close and what is public, and kind of how do you think about that?
Well, I think the first thing is that anything that Citizens Climate Lobby, if Mark or Danny or Madeline or any of the other people on the monthly call said, that we're not, if there's some information that they have said, we want to hold close, obviously we're following that. We're part of CCL. Anything else, well, here's a good example. Silicon Valley Leadership Group, they had a meeting. We helped organize this meeting with Microsoft, hosted it, attended by Apple, Google, Facebook, Salesforce, Tesla. I can't remember all the names, but all of the big names in high tech in Silicon Valley were there with their policy and or sustainability people. They're planning on coming back in April to have a second meeting, and we expect they're going to come out with something akin to the Climate Leadership Council founding members, the George Shultz, ExxonMobil, General Motors, some statement on carbon pricing. So right now we've got a blog post that pretty much says in public what I have just told you. When we get some information that we think you might need to know that we're not ready to tell the world about yet, then we'd pass that along with that condition. But I don't think that's going to really happen too much. Anything that you would say or commit to writing, I always follow the rule, because I've been working in community stuff and political stuff for a long time, is anything that I put, even in an email to my daughter, I think about it appearing on the front page of the local paper the next day. And that's part of the CCL way, is, we're not trash talking people. We're not dealing in national security secrets. This stuff is, for the most part, going to be pretty open. Does that get at what your concern is?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And then just kind of like general strategies. I mean, I understand it will depend a little bit on, what we decide locally, what the feeling is. But do you have any thoughts on whether it's more effective to like cast that big net for a lot of small fish? It's like, oh, I know this brewery and this coffee shop and this restaurant owner, and kind of getting some of those local businesses. Or if, if we're just starting out and if we're trying to have the biggest impact, do you suggest that we try to find some of those like bigger fish with a more targeted net?
Well, that's the conversation that we're going to have when you have your team together and we do the kickoff. That's strategy. And if your liaison and your group leader or anybody else in the chapter who is well networked is available, they're part of the conversation. Sometimes it's good. And, we I got an endorsement. I was trying to recruit one of my local clean energy environmental advocates to the cause. And he said, Bruce, I need to make some money. I can't spend much time on this, but what else could I do? Well, here's a link, go endorse it. And I mean, within 5 minutes, he had gone to the website, he had downloaded the endorsement form, printed it, signed it, scanned it, uploaded it, and sent it back to me. And now that's one more thing. I have a success under my belt. If I was a new person to this and I got somebody to do something, that's good. And that's how you think as managers of this and as leaders. Even if they might seem insignificant, you never know who they know. You never know, their relationship with somebody who has more power. And and I wouldn't spend a lot of time going after your hair cutter, for instance. If your hair cutter he's got 5 clients and you're one of them. Although I love my hair cutter, and she actually referred me to somebody who is now, he's a junior college student, and he's a very able assistant and is working on this Grasstops Outreach national campaign. So stuff like that happens. You're probably the best judge of it. So it's a combination. But if you have a strategic account that's headquartered in your district, like I was mentioning Walmart in Arkansas, then you're teamed up with the kind of the large account team people. And if there's a meeting at the corporate headquarters, you could go to that, and we might have somebody, Laura Madden from the chemical industry team would attend via phone or something. So we try to put the people and the talent and the experience where it can be best used.
Okay.
Okay.
And someone as a follow-up to that, do you have any suggestions? What kind of preliminary research before having all of your wonderful resources? It seems like Cincinnati area has a lot of kind of business think tanks or organizations that are trying to either market to multiple organizations, or even like our park board has a lot of contacts that kind of reach out into different areas of business.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions about like going, I mean, my original thought is that we went after a place like that has like the big Rolodex might be a good place to start, rather than trying to like make individual contacts with places. But I don't know, I mean, does that approach make sense, or do you feel like it makes more sense to kind of individualize contacts?
Yeah, it depends. That's a really good question. Because we are working with trade groups, and we are, and many chapters are working with, the Chamber of Commerce, for instance, or comparable organizations. And sometimes a critical factor is, do you have a champion with some kind of position of influence in the organization? And if you do, excuse me, if you do, they can make things happen there. But frequently what's going to happen is they'll say, well, I need, I'm just a staffer, and I need support from the board. So if it's a nonprofit, there's a board of directors, and maybe the executive director is a complete climate champion. That might be good. If one of the lower level staff people is a CCL member, then their advice is probably going to be get support from these people, the president of the board and the past president of the board, and this particular person who's the head of the policy subcommittee. And then it's more likely that their Rolodex would open. Then it's also another thing too, is the ask, because if you're asking for an endorsement from the Sonoma County Alliance or the Petaluma Area Chamber of Commerce, and you're asking them to support fee and dividend, you've got to explain fee and dividend, and sometimes that's not easy. If you're asking for them to come to a meeting, as we mentioned before, and talk about what they're doing to reduce the carbon footprint of their members, and that's it, and they stay away from policy, that's an easier ask, and it's still effective because it's bringing up the climate issue as an issue of concern for a member's constituents.
Okay.
So again, to summarize that, it depends on the organization. If you have somebody high up who's a champion, whether they're staff or board, good. And if they seem like they're of strategic importance, it might be when we have our regular calls, or me or Harold or one of the others on our team, it's shoot us an email and say, I'm working with this group. This is what's happened. Do you have any suggestions? And hopefully, in our network, we'll be able to come back with a meaningful and helpful answer.
Okay. I would switch gears to kind of more specific to our situation, which I don't know if you want to record. And Teresa, do you have any other general questions about the process?
No, I have maybe some specific ones. So I say go ahead and we'll.
And I think these are important too, because you're not going to be unique in a lot of this, the quality, the type of the questions.
Okay. Now I'm kind of thinking about how to kind of tap our group in. Like I said, at this point, we have, including myself, who are considering themselves more kind of behind the scenes in research. Teresa is going after everything, which is amazing. And then we have another individual who I think has the time to do like the FaceTime and the conversations. And I think one of our first things to do in a meeting is to try to inspire some more people to be involved.
Yes.
And previously, before talking, kind of connecting with you all, our goal was to kind of gather some materials and some training that we would then bring to our bigger monthly meeting of the greater group,
Right.
and have like a brainstorm that night. Just say like, let's do some training and then let's create a prospect list. So actually talking to you makes me feel better, because I think we were kind of on the right track. In order to tap you in, do you think, I mean, you talked about doing a training. Do you think it's better to meet to try to get like the 5 of us together? Or I'm almost thinking it might be good if you kind of did you can do this type of presentation of like,
Yes.
this is what would actually, and kind of, would you be able to like call into that monthly meeting?
Yes.
Is that what you would recommend we start?
Well, I think this is making me think about that big question of somebody looks at a 28-page slideshow without an introduction and say it was forwarded to them by their group leader. They go, "Oh, this looks like way too much work for me. I got a job, I got a family." And it may be, but it also may be that the small steps into it are really acceptable. Really would work for them, but they can't be scared away by looking like this is a half-time job. So I do agree, and I think there's probably we need to adapt some of the material, but that would be really easy, and pull out some examples like what happened in Idaho and how did those people work and who were they, and let's see. Yeah, I think another thing, the inspiring part of this, and I did want to show you this, is the vision of this. Is this worth making it my priority as a chapter member to do this versus to do something else as a chapter member? And here is we have this project dashboard, and we have rated every single member of Congress based on whether they're on the Solutions Caucus and so on and so forth. But the idea is if we had 100 of these things going, imagine what it would be like. And the only way we're going to get 100 of them going is if in each of those 100 we have half a dozen people like yourselves, being part of it. So at least, this could have a mighty impact on the outcome. And at the same time, what are those things? And I think this is something we need to think more about. The BCL steering committee, and this is in fact something in that workshop that we did at our regional conference, where you see some of those exercises. Maybe even to go through one of those exercises, because the idea is we got people who weren't already involved in this. We're trying to show them what it would be like. So we could craft something that would maybe be 15 minutes if that's the amount of time that we had, and either we'd be on the call, or we would try to give you enough information and support that you could do it if we couldn't. Because quite honestly, there's a few of us, we're super dedicated, but there's only so much time we can spend as well. Yeah. And part of all this is just how do we get the most out of what we've got? And I think that's a good suggestion, because I know you're going to encounter people who are like, this doesn't look like it's worth the effort.
Well, and I guess I almost feel like at our last meeting, we kind of shifted to the conversation we had is like, where can we start? Like, what context do we have?
Mm-hmm.
And my impression was that there was some excitement in the room as people started to think about, oh wait, I have this connection that I hadn't thought about using before, and I think it might just be empowering people to just think of 1 or 2 people that they're willing to reach out to, and they were looking for that kind of support and training. So if we said that we have this, I think it could go well. If we're not saying like you person are responsible for running this, but it's like, why don't you think our 1 or 2 people, and we'll provide the support for you to feel like you need to go after them. and whether, you know, like I said, like you provide a lot of material, so I'm sure we could put together some kind of thing. But if you're saying that you would like to engage groups, that would be one way that we've talked about, a need that we have.
Yeah, and I think this is a pretty simple picture of what that looks like here. That, you know, we're going to give them organization and training. They're going to get tools. They're going to get this prospect list. They'll get a place to keep track of their meeting stuff. So they're very focused. They're not spending half their time trying to find the email that has a link to the folder that has 3 different versions of a prospect list. And then they will get support from you and from Teresa and other kind of the more leadership people in these chapters, as well as from the BCL people, both Harold and myself, and the sector team people, and the introductions. So beyond those first few that they know. But I think if they just went out and they wanted to get a meeting with one person and get one endorsement and or one commitment to sign a letter, and they were successful on that, yay. And now they're ready to try the next one. So we want to make that first one as easy as possible. And just showing that they will not be alone without, you know, some powerful tools.
Yeah.
Right. And I agree with Ren. I think it's almost a sales pitch to the members in both of the groups. And if you have an example or two that's real simple that says, oh, so-and-so knew this guy from, you know, the soccer teams that they were both parents of, and they, you know, and he was able to get through, and they just hear one simple example that triggers in their mind, oh, I might know somebody and I could do one thing. You know, I'm afraid at first people are like, oh, I don't want to become part of another subgroup that has a lot more work. I think that would help out. I agree, Ren. That's a great idea.
We've heard that from Todd Elvins, who runs the endorser program, said first concern is make sure, you know, hey, here's a new idea we want you to do. Thank you, goodbye. One, we are going to help you do it. And 2, you know, we're confident that you can do it. It's going to be rewarding and it'll make a difference.
If we were looking at a timeline, I don't know if we're still going to have our meeting tonight because we have some snow, but maybe we can set a phone call. Timeline wise, our next monthly meeting is next week. So I don't think that'll work. But if we were to try to shoot for maybe something in March, it sounds to me like some things we could do to prepare for that kind of group meeting would be that if we could get that initial list from you and kind of try to organize a little and prioritize, because I think people also asked at that last meeting if we're going to brainstorm contacts, have a starter list, which sounds like you already have, kind of give them some inspiration and kind of see where things are connected. So not only getting that list from you, but if also I try to connect with our liaisons to see what kind of recommendations they have of who might be impactful. So just try to kind of put that into some context and some formulation, but then kind of go from having that prepared, having maybe some materials that people can look at, like these are some sample things, which I've been kind of gathering already, but sample, you know, information sheets or information about what we are, or the leadership letters, like having all that material there. Is there anything else you think that would be helpful for us to prep in order to have that local group meeting?
Yeah, I think probably at least looking at the exercises that are in these slides, which I'll post and send you the link to. We thought a lot about that, and we have a guy who's like an executive coach in Silicon Valley. He's really good, Steve Levin, and he's good at this particular aspect of how do you get people involved in stepping up to any kind of leadership role. And sometimes a leadership role is just leading yourself, but we can have, I think, Steve and some of the others here look at the material and now try to tailor it not for the 2-hour regional conference workshop, but tailor it for 15 to 20 minutes at a monthly chapter meeting to bring other people in the chapter into this team.
Okay.
And I think for March, if the next one is in a week, you know, we can do what we can. If you want to introduce it and have a very light version of it, you know, who knows? Because there might be somebody there in March who won't be there, or somebody there in February who won't be there in March.
Yeah, no, I think it would be on the agenda, but as far as like actually trying to, because we're kind of talking about setting aside most of the meeting. I mean, I can check. Well, Doug is our group leader, and hopefully we'll connect with him tonight in some form. So I'll get I just wonder if we would have a better list put together in a month.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I can see what his input might be.
We will definitely have your, your starter prospect list in place, I would say within a week.
Okay.
Maybe sooner, but we've, you guys are lucky because you're at the front end, and I think it's going to start, the pace is going to pick up as more people are finding out about this and wanting to do it. So
yeah, I kind of sense that. I'm like, ooh, let's talk to them early because I know they're going to be swamped really fast.
Yeah. Well, to make matters even worse, I'm going on a 3-week Grand Canyon float trip, leaving in 2.5 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Good for you.
Yeah, too bad, huh? my daughter has a friend that kind of won the private trip lottery. They give a certain number of permits out for private groups, not the outfitters.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, so it's once in a lifetime opportunity. So, but we have other people. Again, Harold Hiddleman knows every bit of this as well, and we're going to try to get a couple of other people who would be able to do some kind of support for the chapters, at least in getting them going. And then, as you go through and start making progress, we'll try to engage other people who can provide you with those introductions.
Okay, great.
Oh, wait.
That sounds like a plan to me.
Okay, so the very next step would be I will post the slides, the recording, and we'll get a prospect list out. And then maybe we can talk. Maybe it'd be a good idea if the three of us just got back together again at this time in 1 week, or I'd rather set a date now, and if you guys can do that, or we'll just do we can do it by email, but sometimes that gets confusing.
This time works for me next week, if that's good for you, Ron.
I can do that.
Okay. Right, that'll give us a deadline for getting that prospect list together and get some of the other material. Great, well, thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been so helpful.
Yeah.
Yes,
thank you very much.
All right, well, take care now. I'm gonna sign off here, and we'll see you soon.
Great,
okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And Ren, I'm gonna send you something in email in just a second.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right, see you, bye. I don't know how to do it.
We gotta stop.